Correct. It is time for yet another edition of Orange and Blue Today, presented by Champ Honda, Cecil Lammey, Andrew Mason, and Mace. We're getting about a week away from the draft. I know the Broncos didn't pick till Friday, but as we get further away, it's almost sad for me. It's like Christmas is over, and I just can't wait to see these new presents in action for the Broncos. So people always say, you must love this time. I'm like, I do, but there's also a twinge of sadness I think I'm looking for, because it's like, now my favorite time of year is over. Okay. Oh, yeah. Right. Well, and the great thing about the NFL, and talking to our program director at the Fan, Raj Sharon, and he was like, I got some rules to change the NBA. And I'm like, in the NFL, hope does spring eternal. I mean, the Bengals, dare I say it? Are the Bengals a well run franchise now? Like, they haven't signed Joe Burrow yet, but with the Burrow pick, you can take a normal team that, had some time in the 80s and, early 90s thing, but has been regularly a laughing stock, some Carson Palmer days, but yeah, hope does spring eternal with these teams. And even with the Denver Broncos, it's been a down time, but man, if you hit the right way, stay healthy, and get the right picks, the right players, you can turn things around. Mm-hmm. Orange and Blue today, presented by Shop Honda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, talking about the Denver Broncos. And all right, the more we get away from the draft, Mace, again, the more I get excited about Marvin Mims Jr. I know rookie favorites is our first topic, and it's like, okay, I kind of almost want to talk about Drew Sanders some more, but I think there is a clear path to the position where Marvin Mims is going to be, and certainly that's, slot, and then even on outside if they wanted him to. But, like, for rookie favorites for me, Marvin Mims, I'm hearing people throw around Emmanuel Sanders. I don't know if he has the dog like Emmanuel Sanders, to be sure, but certainly speed, explosiveness, playmaking ability. I can't wait till Broncos fans go nuts over Marvin Mims having an 80-yard touchdown grab, because that's the type of skill that this guy has. So the more that I think about it, and obviously thinking fantasy football perspective as well, respect to Cortland Sutton, respect to Tim Patrick. Jerry Jeudy's going to do his thing, but Marvin Mims Jr. might be my favorite rookie from this class that I feel pretty good about. Yes. All right, Mace, guess what we're having? Technical difficulties. I can see you. I can hear you. Fans can't see or hear you, so we apologize for that. We're doing the show. So I'm going to guess, Mace, try to back out and come back in, I guess. I'm not sure, but I just checked our YouTube link as well, so... Yeah, I can see you perfectly fine. I can hear you perfectly fine. I think we've been having a good show for 8 minutes. So anyway, yeah, some weird technical issues today. So we work through this and we get it figured out. So Mace, if you back out and then come back into the room, maybe that'll do it. Maybe that'll do the trick. I'm not exactly sure. So here we go. All right, rookie favorites. Yeah, Marvin Mims. I want to say Drew Sanders as well. Drew Sanders is such an outstanding football playing Jesse, as Mark Schlereth says. And to me, it's the diagnostic ability that he shows, that when you see a lot of young players who are ultra dynamic, young players that can get after the passer, then it's like hunting dog, right? They just want to go and get the passer. With Sanders, he can bring pressure, can create disrupted dropbacks, but he's also the type of player that can, be well-rounded in what he does in terms of not biting on double moves, not biting on play fakes. I'm concerned about his coverage ability. I want to see that first and foremost, but then we'll talk about that. Mace, you got me now? I can hear you now?
I've had you
hear you now.
I've had you the whole time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Look, my thing, I actually just did a retest on it. I've got, it's up to a gig and I'm at 750 megabytes a second. So with all respect, I don't think I think this is an EV Mux problem. I don't think this is an MP my problem.
Right. Yeah. So we will see about that, and I'm gonna double check and make sure that they can see you now. If you can see him now in the chat room, make sure to say hi and say what is up. I can see you now on YouTube, so there you go.
So whatever. I'm over this software.
We figured it out at least, and we can do 20 minutes of a show and get this thing done. I was just talking about Drew Sanders, of course, Mace. I couldn't help myself.
So none of my Mims stuff got out there?
Well, I heard you. I'm hopeful that on the recording it has you on there.
Okay.
Because again, I've been able to see and hear you this entire time. But it's looked like for 8 minutes I was talking to myself.
And
I
so
guess I've done that from time to
when I
time.
was talking, it was just silence, huh?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
maybe
And a blank screen.
some people might actually consider that a welcome change.
Probably more on my end than yours, but either way, Sanders, I had to sneak in some love for Sanders as well because I'm just super excited. And again, I'm excited to see these kids make some plays, even if it is in just practice and mini camp.
They gotta use him properly. This is where I have confidence in what Vance Joseph learned in Arizona about dealing with positionless players like Zaven Collins, like Isaiah Simmons. Although it took a while for them to really hone in on the best way to utilize Isaiah Simmons, and because of that, his development has been a little bit more of a slow go than I think the Cardinals would have hoped, and that's leading to them bypassing on the fifth-year option. By the way, I mean, they passed on the fifth-year option for Isaiah Simmons. Would it surprise anybody at all if the Broncos sign him in free agency next year?
Not at all.
Not, I mean, that's something to, I'd say that's something that for everyone to kind of take off their hat, put that under their cap, and just stow it up there until next year. And if Isaiah Simmons is a Bronco, remember who told you first. But
Is that like calling your shot, Mace? Right? You're calling your shot. May 3rd, 2023. Mace is guessing and calling a shot for free agency of 2024. I love it, baby. I love it.
I'm not overtly calling a shot. I'm just saying it'd be something to remember. And if you look sort of also at like expiring contracts at outside linebacker, inside linebacker, Josie Jewell is on the second year of his contract, so he's in a contract year. Effectively, in terms of regarding the terms of Randy Gregory's contract, this is kind of a contract year for him. Basically, he's got to put it together right now, or there's not going to be a place for him. So you can kind of see an opening there, maybe depending on how Drew Sanders develops as well. But I just kind of point to two of the four starters at linebacker who may not be on this team next year. And if Drew Sanders has developed into a starter, then that would leave one spot, and maybe that is somebody like Simmons, and then you're really having some fun, because if you had Simmons and Sanders together, not only the two S's, but you have two guys who are chess pieces as well. And so the exciting thing about Drew Sanders is the versatility to me.
Right.
But I think it's important to expect him to be what he is. I saw some tweets Friday night after the Broncos made the pick thinking of him, oh, well, this is to try to contend with opposing tight ends. No. That's not Drew Sanders' game.
No,
Okay,
not
at all. Let's get that off of the table of expectations for Drew Sanders to be the tight end stopper, the Travis Kelce neutralizer. That's not Drew Sanders. Drew Sanders is going to be the guy who supplements the pass rush. You can work with him outside, but sometimes from inside as well. I mean, I actually one of the things I like here, Cease, is if you kind of massage it carefully, I think he could really work really well at Baron Browning, to where, okay, one's going to drop, one's going to attack. You're not going to know which is which, because Baron Browning, with background as an inside linebacker, has those skill sets as well to drop into coverage, not only attack the passer. So maybe piece by piece, you start putting together a potential linebacker core that a couple of years from now has, a year or two from now, has Alex Singleton, who is that stout guy who's going to make sure that the damage doesn't get worse on a play. He's going to make the stop. But then maybe you start looking at a situation where you could have two or even three other positionless players that should move around, and I think Vance Joseph would have some fun with that.
I think so as well. Orange and Blue today, presented by Champ Honda, Cecil Lammey, Andrew Mason. I'm not crazy, talking into the void.
I'm crazy.
Exactly. That's what we
crazy.
do.
Yeah.
We're crazy for maybe not the software we use. But anyway.
Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but not crazy for EV Mux. Something like that.
This is not a paid endorsement for EV Mux. Not at all.
No.
Anyway, let's talk about way too early, because you called your shot. And way too early mocks is what you wrote about at denversports.com. A quarterback being selected by the Broncos in way too early mocks, but not anybody that we had been talking about, not Caleb Williams, not Drake May. It is, in fact, Bo Nix. So let's discuss this and what your thoughts are on the way too early mocks.
A year ago, we would not have been talking about Bo Nix being anywhere in this conversation, right?
Right.
When he transferred to Oregon from Auburn. A lot of questions when he made that leap. He started answering them. If he had come out in this year's draft cycle, I think he would have been picked right around the same range as Hendon Hooker. Maybe he goes a little bit before Hendon Hooker because of Hooker's ACL. But either way, you're talking about where Hooker ended up landing late second, early third. Now let's say you add another year. Let's say he stacks a 2023 season that looks a lot like his 2022 season. Then absolutely you're talking about Bo Nix being a first rounder, but also a mid first rounder. He on this CBS Sports mock, he was QB4 behind Caleb Williams, Drake May, Quinn Ewers. And while this mock did not include trades or anything like that, I think it's fair to say that if the Broncos come out of this season believing that Russell Wilson isn't the answer and Jarrett Stidham, while a nice piece, isn't the long-term answer, I think it's much more likely they try to move up than stand pat. I think, and one team to look out for is, because they have two potentially very early first-round picks, is the Arizona Cardinals, because Arizona picked up Houston's pick. Let's say both Arizona and Houston are bad. What's to say that the Cardinals, of course, with Kyler Murray, maybe they move on from Kyler Murray. I don't know if the contract's going to allow that, but there's a window there to where if things go a certain way in the season, the Broncos might be looking at a possibility of being able to trade in the top two. And I think that if Russell Wilson isn't the answer, I think trading up is much more likely than standing pat and taking Bo Nix. I think they would trade up for Williams or May.
Yeah, Bo Nix doesn't move the needle. I mean, if you want a quarterback next year in the draft, I get it. You have to sell the farm. You have to get to the top two picks. Like, that's what you have to do. So when we were just having the discussion about next year's secondary and Justin Simmons' future, I'm thinking, like, Justin Simmons might not be here. Pat Surtain might not be here. That's a conversation for next year. I thought it was silly when D-Mac, who was our friend, but when he brought up trading Surtain this year, no. You hold on to it, because the Bo Nix thing, you have to make that move. And I understand that, Mitchell Trubisky was the first quarterback and he's garbage or whatever. Yes. I get that. But we are clearly looking at two, not three, not four, but two clear franchise quarterbacks in next year's draft. You must secure one of those two's services, or else you're doing yourself and your team a disservice.
The attractiveness of these two quarterbacks is that either one of them would have gone number one overall this year, and certainly either one of them would have gone number one overall last year. So you're Williams or May, both. It's not, and while it's fair to say that maybe Caleb Williams is a notch above Drake May right now, Drake May would have gone before Bryce Young in this year's draft. Okay, you have to go back to Trevor Lawrence for the last draft where Drake May wouldn't have been the first quarterback off the board and probably the first player off the board. So this is the attractiveness of it. You can be one or two and get somebody who's going to change your franchise. Are we going a little bit too all in on Drake May this early? I don't think so, based on what we watched of him last year, based on the skill set. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens because, of course, you've got to change an offensive coordinator in North Carolina this year. But to me, if May has a season that looks like last year, in spite of changing play callers, that's another thing that would confirm that he belongs there at the top of not only this draft, but most drafts that we've seen in the last decade.
Yeah, and you've got to go get that elite level talent. And again, I know people might bring up Josh Allen. Like, all right, I get that, and Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, but we are staring at your Trevor Lawrence-like players. Those don't come around that often. I'd say Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, those type of players. And how many years was like a decade between those two, right? 2012
it was
and
9 years.
9 years. So almost a decade between those two players. we're getting 2 of them next year. So it's clear, and that's how you make the move. That's how you try. Because, again, I've often said it, 32 teams, 20 teams are kidding themselves. There's 12 teams that got it right, and even some of the 12 that have it right, they don't have it right for much longer, and they're maybe covering some stuff up. And you can do what Kyle Shanahan is doing and make the quarterback the least important part of the offense. I get that, and build around the team, do what Atlanta's doing, right? Hey, they're trying to build everything up around a Desmond Ridder. You're kidding yourself. Like, you got to get a Caleb Williams. You got to get a Drake May. And then add on to Sean Payton, making that quarterback even better. That's perfection.
And the other thing that also comes into play here is if the Broncos are in position to potentially move up and get May or Williams, it meant that this season went a little askew at some point. So you mentioned Justin Simmons earlier. Let's say this team starts off 2-4, 3-5. We'll get the schedule next week, it appears. It looks like we're going to find out the Broncos' schedule in 8 days. But if they're sitting there with a sluggish start, is Justin Simmons the next midseason trade? As far as the tradition of recent years has been for the Broncos to trade a player who either is at a high level or was at a high level, right? Every year but the pandemic year of 2020, because you had to go through a few days before you could have a player cleared to join a new team. But you remember 2018, the late Demaryius Thomas, 2019, Emmanuel Sanders, 2021, Von Miller, 2022, Bradley Chubb. The annual tradition for the Broncos, unfortunately, has been trading a star player at midseason. And if this season gets off the rails a little bit, would it surprise me at all if Justin Simmons is next? No. And you mentioned Pat Surtain. And of course, trading Pat Surtain, that wasn't going to happen this offseason. And, you mentioned D-Mac earlier. But if you have another rough season and you're trying to move up, it's going to take a lot. I mean, literally, let's say the Broncos are picking 13th, right?
Ooh.
Okay, 13. You can get to the top 2 picks. It's probably going to cost you pick 13, your next 2 first-rounders, Pat Surtain, and a second-round pick. But that's the cost of doing business. And that's where, if this season starts to go a little bit sideways and you're trying to accumulate draft capital, that's where, if you're 2-4 and you're struggling and a team calls about Justin Simmons, you probably don't hang up the phone, right? You probably listen. If the season is not off to a great start, you probably listen to a lot of calls coming in at the deadline about some of your star players, because if you're having that kind of start, that probably means Russell Wilson is struggling to some degree to where you're thinking he may not be the answer here. We may need to get out from that contract, and then you got to start going to fish in the rookie pool, and you're going to need as much draft capital as you can potentially to move up and get in a position to get one of those 2 quarterbacks.
And you'd be happy to pay the price.
Yes, you would. Some prospects are worth selling the farm for, okay?
Right.
And I think either Caleb Williams or Drake May, when all the dust settles after this year, are going to be worth making that kind of audacious deal for if you need to. Look, the clearest path to relevance remains getting Russell Wilson back to where he was in Seattle. That is the first road to take. But if you don't feel like that road is going to end up where you hope it will, you have to be prepared to make that turnoff. And that's why you and I talked before the draft so often, and we said this. The Broncos might make deals in the draft, and they did. But the one item that had to be off limits in any trade was next year's first-round pick. And indeed it was.
Hang on to it, because you might need it. Hang on to your hats. Roport here in the chat room says, I agree. There's too many unknown variables to mock the 2024 NFL draft. We had a fun discussion and debate, and friendly debate. Neither one of our feelings were hurt, even though we disagree. I wish debates were not dead. And not like stupid debates like Shannon and Skip. Sorry, Skip. not that type of stuff. Okay, not Stephen A. Not any sort of first take, bad
I don't
take,
even
hot take,
watch any of
whatever.
that, man. I
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
stand it.
It's largely a waste of time. But I'm actually talking about real debate and discussion, and I may not just be talking about sports. But either way, debate is largely dead. But you and I had a great debate yesterday. What about the mocks? I think they're fun because we're kind of fast forwarding to what could people be looking at, who could possibly be available. But again, just like a Sam Howell, a year before he was drafted, was considered could be number 1 overall, and he went in the 5th. So things can change. Not with Caleb Williams and Drake May. That's different.
He went in the 5th, but look how much he's impressed the team that he's on. People overreacted to what happened roster-wise. Remember, the 2 running backs, Michael Carter, Devontae Williams, both went in the draft. Receivers all went. They turned over the entire confidence with the players in the league. That had a couple of things on the offensive line. And people wondered, okay, why does it look different at the start? Who's the new next acting like 7 times in the opener? Okay, why did it look so different? It looked so different because you had all these pieces coming in. Fast forward to the end of the season, Sam Howell's falling, right? He's gotten past it. But everyone got so hung up on some of the issues that dealt with that were involved dealing with a heavy pass rush and dealing with a group of new targets and new skill players that they didn't kind of look down to this is how Sam evolved over the season and got tougher and got better. And also I thought Cass was better than Harrison because he did not do the same with him that team was a mess for a while. Never saw Sam rush, right? I was watching Sam Howell that year, Steve. I thought this guy passed the best of terrible. And I said it last year. Once he dropped, the Broncos weren't going to take quarterback early. But when he was dropping into round 4, you had to have the conversation. I still think the Broncos should have taken Sam Howell out of the season. And boy, oh boy, we should have a different conversation right now on the quarterback position. They had taken. That's when but now he's going to start the run this year. And I think he's going to do fine. So that's another. I think maybe Sam Howell taught us a lesson that when quarterback has a little bit of a step back, maybe you can't overreact to that. I feel like people in draft circles and NFL circles overreact and then take a look at the totality and think how it works. They had a gone more in line with where his talent, skills, and character is.
All right, I'm gonna wrap it up because
Sorry,
yeah,
when he dropped last year, I'm like, I thought everybody's overreacting.
right.
And look, I mean, Washington may have gotten the day 3 diamond in the rough, right? Actually, it's funny to look at last year's draft and the 2 most successful quarterbacks likely will, and out of that draft, end up being a 5th rounder and Mr. Irrelevant there from the 7th. Strange.
All right, more technical difficulties. So I'm going to tie a bow on today's program. It's going to be a little bit short, but we appreciate you all for that. We'll get everything figured out, worked out. I think there's some gremlins in the system today. Anyway, he's Andrew Mason. I am Cecil Lammey, Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Honda. Make sure to do those YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. He's Mace, I'm Cease, OBT is BFD, and we appreciate you. Be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned, and as always, please, stay frosty.